Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Before we begin, please hit the like button if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and you can also join my Patreon. We have a big goal there, and I will talk about that at the end of the video. I've also got 2 podcasts out now, and they're doing really well. I would love for you to listen to them. This is the first one. This is Dining with Death. This is just the audio taken from the video episodes before I rebranded the channel. This channel used to be called Dining with Death. This is the current podcast, Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. All of the audio has been re-recorded, and you will also get some podcast exclusives that you can't hear anywhere else. I release new episodes every Monday and every Wednesday. You can listen to both podcasts on Apple and Spotify. It's cult day here on Dark Hearts. And this story is one of the more complicated cult stories that I've told. It's complicated because there are people on both sides of the fence claiming persecution. The Chinese government claims this is a dangerous cult, it's evil, it's bad for people to be involved in, and the cult members are claiming they're being persecuted. Well, there are also people that have left the cult or have been associated with the cult, maybe they have family members in the cult, that claim the cult is doing the persecuting. Is this a dance company run by a cult, or is it a cult that is funded and run by a dance company? Are the practitioners of this religion, the members of this cult, Falun Gong, are they being persecuted by the Chinese government? The Chinese government is atheist and communist, and this cult practices religion. This cult, Falun Gong, has been called the Scientology of China. And there are a lot of similarities. I am getting to a point with Scientology where this is going to sound harsh, I just have no patience for anyone who's involved with it. If you're on TikTok, you know Tiffany, the mustard lady. It's this lady that sits in her car and eats a plate of really healthy food and everything's really dipped in mustard. But she also sells her own powdered drink mixes. Guess where all the money goes? Scientology. Tiffany, the mustard lady, is a Scientologist. Guess who else is a Scientologist? The Pasta Queen. If you're on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, you know the Pasta Queen. I'm not into it. I'm not into it. So to hear that Falun Gong has been compared to Scientology, that already kind of sets my teeth on edge. You've all seen the posters. You've all seen the advertisements. Even if you might not have consciously seen them, they're in here somewhere. I can almost bet. This dance company is called Shen Yun, and it is not only funded by Falun Gong, all the members of the dance company are in the cult of Falun Gong. You've seen the Shen Yun commercials. When Shen Yun comes to your town, it's like the experience of a lifetime. Dun, dun, dun. Like super dramatic. I can't play any of the commercials or any of the clips really here for you. I tried. I got the recordings and loaded them onto YouTube as a test, and they all came back as copyrighted. But the images are like stunning scenery, these gorgeous, colorful backdrops, and these beautiful dancers in amazing costumes. They're smiling with, like one leg over their head. Now, the dance aspect of this alone is very interesting. You guys that have been with me for a while know that I owned a dance school here in St. George for a long time. I was a professional dancer for a very short-lived period of time after I got married as a teenager, and then I opened a dance school and ran it for many, many years. We'll get into just a little bit of what I find as a dancer to be unusual about this cult, about Shen Yun. But every year, tens of thousands of people flock to these Shen Yun performances. They sit and they ooh and they ah over the majesty. And I'll bet you 90% of them do not know they are watching people perform for them that have lost most of their free will. I'll bet a lot of those people would not be happy to learn that their money, the money they paid for those tickets, is going to a cult. And them tickets aren't cheap. The propaganda surrounding the cult of Falun Gong is so pervasive that it's difficult to know what is even close to the truth. If you Google Falun Gong, you will get articles that come up, article after article, and it talks about how badly the members of Falun Gong are being persecuted, how the Chinese government is trying to destroy the people, the cult, the religion. And the articles look like they've come from news sources. But when you look into the news sources, they're almost all linked to the Epoch Times. The Epoch Times is the propaganda machine for the cult. But it's so interesting the way they've gone out of their way to make the articles look very similar to like Vice articles. It's fascinating, and it is diabolical. Get yourself a nice cup of tea or a cup of coffee, a soda. Hell, by the end of this, you might just be slugging Tatoes out of the bottle. But strap in and let's get ready for this story. It is a wild one. This is the story of Shen Yun, the dance company, and the cult behind it, Falun Gong. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's get into it. Our story begins in the mid-90s. As you are very well aware, China has a long history of human rights violations. Freedom of speech, the concept of freedom of speech, was only incorporated into the Chinese government's constitution in 1982. Even after the concept of free speech was adopted into the constitution in China, the government continues to persecute people that speak out against it. China is a communist country, and it is also an atheist country. China has the world's largest population of people that do not affiliate with any religion. Most people who consider themselves communists also consider themselves atheists. And that's why it's so easy for a certain group of people here in America to be like, them commie, atheist, godless Chinese people. They don't know anything about atheism and probably little about communism. I'm not saying communism's a good thing, but only 1 in 10 Chinese nationals identifies as a religious person. That is 10%. That is very, very low. And then along comes this man, Li Hongzhi. Li was born in 1951 or 52, depending on who you ask. Li was always interested in religion, and by the time he was in his 40s, he was determined to become a religious leader himself. Until he was in his mid-40s, this man was a government clerk. He was working a very low-paying job, a job that does not have any respect associated with it. And you already know what I'm going to say. Cult leaders in their minds are very, very special. And a lot of times they are people that feel like they are not getting the recognition for just how special they are. Li is working this, low-paying job. He's down the government ladder, almost to the bottom rung. And he decides he's had enough of that life. So what do you do when you don't have success anywhere else and you're manipulative and smart enough to figure it out? You start a cult. Like so many cult leaders, Li decided he was going to make himself much more special than he actually is. He began publicly teaching his brand of Christianity in 1992 when he was living in Chengsheng, and then he began traveling across China giving lectures. Li called his new religion Falun Gong. Sometimes it is referred to as Falun Dafa. Let's briefly go over what the belief system is within Falun Gong. The teachings of Falun Gong are based on the principles of truthfulness, benevolence, and forbearance. In Chinese, these are said, Zen, Shan, Ren. The religion involves a lot of meditation and promises that if its practitioners adhere to the teachings of Falun Gong, they can attain supernatural powers. And we're off the rails. But if you try to get supernatural powers, if you go into your meditative practices expecting the outcome to be supernatural powers, you will never get them. The supernatural powers will not be received by people who seek them. There are a lot of elements of Buddhism and Taoism in Falun Gong, but there are also a lot of differences. There are those that insist Falun Gong is a religion. I've said this 100 times. All religions are cults by the definition of the word cult. But some religions are much more culty than others. This one's a cult. There are religious elements in Falun Gong, but it is far more cult than religion. Believers preach that Falun Gong surpasses and bypasses the communist atheist ideology of the Chinese state. Believers say that the belief system is all about compassion and benevolence, and that practitioners work off of karma. Do you know what just flashed through my mind? Have you ever seen that episode of King of the Hill where Luann joins a cult and Hank tries to go and get her out? And Hank pulls up in his truck and he looks over and he's like, hey, are y'all in the cult? And one of the cult member girls comes out and goes, we are practitioners of love and compassion. And he cuts her off and goes, yep, this is it. That's such a good episode. I love that episode, and I love Bobby Goes Nuts. On top of the teachings about meditation and Buddhism and Taoism in Falun Gong, the members of Falun Gong practice something called Qigong. The concept of Qigong has been around for thousands of years, but it has been kind of co-opted and appropriated by Falun Gong. The practice of Qigong is ancient, but in the 1950s, the Buddhists kind of co-opted the entire, I don't know if it's a theology, the idea of Qigong. Qigong became very popular among people who like some aspects of Buddhism and some aspects of Taoism, but they don't want to follow either to the letter. We all know that religious folks like to cherry pick. They like to pick and choose. I like this scripture, but not this scripture. Well, this scripture justifies my hate, but I don't want to pay attention to this other one that says I'm not supposed to hate. Be mad, but don't be mad at me, because that's just the truth, and you know it is. Qigong promotes the belief of spirituality and immortality. It focuses on the pursuit of spiritual transcendence. Qigong also involves using breath work to improve the mind, the physical body, and the spiritual health. Now, I am a believer in meditation and breath work, not for any sort of supernatural power, but I believe there are a lot of health benefits. About 15 years ago, when I was leaving the Mormon church and having my faith crisis, that's what they call it in Mormonism. I actually hate that term because it's not a crisis, it's an awakening. It can be a crisis, but it's more of an awakening. Like many Mormons who leave, I instantly began looking for my next home. I can't just be homeless spiritually. Somebody's got to lead me. I'm incapable of leading myself. This is how my brain was working. So if I'm going to leave Mormonism, I got to find something else. I can't just be out here on my own, living my own life, believing my own mind, listening to my own intuition. That's chaos. So I was immediately looking for what am I going to get into? I got to get into something else. A lot of people go through that when they leave high demand religion. You're taught your whole life that you're incapable of having everything you need already inside you, which I firmly believe. You're taught that you need a leader, you need an organization, you need a group, you need a book of scripture. I now no longer believe in any of that. I don't think you need anything. If there is a God, I'm an agnostic person. If there is a God and you are part of God, surely everything godlike already lives inside you, right? All you have to do is access it. That's the trick. But leaving Mormonism is very, very traumatic because you are taught that you're losing your family, you're losing your eternal life with God, you are losing your place in heaven. It's very, very heavy. And so it is very common for people that leave things like Mormonism to want to jump into something else. And I did. You have this giant void in your life and you're looking for something to fill that void. If you're lucky, you learn that it's actually not a void. There's actually no void there. You were just taught that there would be a void, so you believed what you were taught. And, we outgrow the belief in, if you find peace in religion, more power to you. But when people leave a high demand religion, they are looking to replace scriptures with crystals, God with the universe. In the music world, there's a joke that says, if you want to be a Christian rock artist, you just sing the same song and replace the word baby with God. So instead of singing baby, baby, you're singing Jesus, Lord. Well, during this period of crisis or awakening in my life, I had a friend that was really into Kundalini yoga. Kundalini yoga is like the king of all yogas, but it is also very culty. If you can pick through the culty shit and get to the heart of it, there's a lot of good there. Kundalini is all about breath work and harnessing the power of your mind. We have a very serious Kundalini practitioner here in St. George, Utah. Her name is Benja. She's a wonderful woman. She owns restaurants here in town, Thai restaurants. They're fabulous. She's fabulous. And I started going to her Kundalini classes. I would say her classes are more about health, not so much about the culty stuff. But in Kundalini, there's a lot of, if you were to walk into a Kundalini class, you would see people around doing things like, I don't even want to pull this face on camera, but it's like, you're panting like a dog. I'm instantly regretting that. But it's called the fire breath. Actually talking about this kind of makes me want to get a little bit back into it, but not in a class setting. I just want to practice it at home. People that are really into Kundalini believe that when you're doing the breath work, your mind goes to a different place. What's actually happening biologically is through that breath, you are over-oxygenating your blood. And it can cause lightheadedness and feelings of euphoria. It's not because something magic is happening. It's because you're oxygenating your blood. It's healthy. So I'm going to these Kundalini classes, and I'm sitting there one day and I've got my turban on. You wrap your head because you want all the heat from your head and all the energy, all the chi to stay in your head. And I'm in my little pose, and and I look around and I'm like, son of a bitch. I just left one cult and joined another one. So I stopped going altogether. Now, that was my religious trauma. My religious trauma was like, stop. I think now I could go back into Kundalini and practice it a little bit and not get weirded out. But back then I was just like, put the brakes on. At the end of Kundalini, you jump into an ice cold pool. And so there's all kinds of health benefits. You get your blood all going and you're all, revved up and your blood's super oxygenated. And then you jump into this ice cold pool, which I know a lot of you know has a lot of health benefits. People are cold plunging all over the place now. And people that practice Kundalini have been doing that for thousands of years. But I bring all of this up because I do understand how people could be very attracted to Qigong. If there is all this breath work and all of this meditation and stuff involved, as someone who got into that world for a significant, it was like 18 months. I know in Asian culture, 18 months is nothing, but for me, I change my mind every 5 minutes. I can tell you that there are health benefits to it. I felt amazing when I was doing Kundalini. Now, along with the breath work and the meditation in Qigong comes an exercise pattern. If you were to walk into a room and watch people practicing Qigong, you would probably think it was Tai Chi. The really slow movements, you see the people in the park practicing the movements together. I've always wanted to try it. So there are some things that might look similar about Qigong and Tai Chi, but they are different. Now, this all sounds very nice, doesn't it? You're doing your breath work, you're doing your meditation, you're worried about your health, you're taking care of yourself. This ain't your first day here. This ain't your first cult rodeo. You know, as well as I do, that all cults look very shiny, happy people on the outside. Of course they do. How in the hell else are they going to get people to join them? At first glance, at second glance, at third glance, a lot of cults look very, very appealing. It's not until you lift up the cover and look at what's going on underneath that you open your eyes. Well, some of us do, some of us don't. So what are the problems with Falun Gong? Why does it matter? Why should we talk about it? Let's talk about that first, and then we're going to talk about Shen Yun, the dance company. The first problem is the leader of the cult, Li Hongzhi. He is seen by the cult members. It is required that you see him as omnipotent. That's the first problem right off the bat. This is Cult 101. There is a leader that is seen as not only a man, much more than a man. The leader cannot be questioned. The leader is omnipotent. The leader has access to God that other people do not have. The leader is very special. He is above other people. Once in a while it's a woman, but most of the time it's a man. And usually the cult leader claims that he and he alone has supernatural abilities. He has the ability to translate things that none of us can read. He has access to magical objects that are given to him by God or angels. And he and only he is in charge of judging what is right, discerning or judging, they're two different things, for other people. He is the one who determines this is what is right for you and this is what you will do if you want to be part of the group. The second problem with Falun Gong is the extreme amount of fear and guilt that is required to practice it. When people try to get out of this cult, terrible things happen to them. There are stories of people being locked in rooms for not days or weeks, but months when they try to leave the cult. There's one particular story I read about that was very disturbing. A woman locked herself in her car. She was trying to run, she was trying to leave, and the other members were like, "Oh, you want to be in the car? We'll make sure you're in the car." They stood around the car for a week and a half while this woman was left with no bathroom, no food, no water. Apparently they did start to give her some water at some point, but she was basically kidnapped. Li Hongzhi tells the practitioners that if they try and leave the cult, they enter what is called the Gate of No Life. It's basically hell, just worded differently. He then says, for those that end up at the Gate of No Life, they spend eternity boiling in a pot of human sputum. You're gonna have to look it up. You're gonna have to look it up. I can't. The third thing that makes Falun Gong very dangerous is that Li Hongzhi raves against modern medicine. He rants and he raves against doctors and any kind of modern medicine. There are too many stories to count of people that have died from preventable diseases and preventable illnesses because they refused to seek medical attention. They didn't want to go against the leaders' teachings, and it cost them their life. The cult members are taught that prayer and meditation cures all illnesses. People who are not cured of their disease or illness are told they are not praying hard enough. They are not meditating enough. As we've discussed here before, this is so insidious. To tell a person with a biological ailment or a mental ailment that they are not really sick, it's their own fault that they're sick because they're not praying hard enough. Insidious. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. When I was Mormon, I was told over and over that the reason that I was so sad and so depressed was because I was not praying enough and I was not reading my scriptures. Well, the psychiatrist that I saw that diagnosed me with postpartum psychosis and actually cured me, he would like a word. I will always be angry about that. I don't think that anger will ever leave me, and I think that's a good thing. I think that anger serves me well. It makes me want to get the word out and to tell other people how dangerous it is to tell someone when you're sick or when you're depressed that you need to pray. The fourth major problem with Falun Gong is that it is the most money-hungry, money-obsessed cult. It's got to be in the top 5. People who join the cult, you'll never believe this, they have to give up all their worldly possessions and all their money to the cult. They don't donate it to somebody else. They have to give it to the cult. Why? Because attachment. And I have to laugh because I got into Buddhism for a while. And Buddhism teaches you that you're not supposed to be attached to anything. Not your home, not your car, not your family, not your children. Attachment is the root of all misery. That's what Buddhism teaches. If there's one thing I know for sure and 2 things for certain, it's this. You get one go around. You get one go around. If I want to spend money on a decent car, if I want to live in a comfortable house, if I want to eat expensive food, and if I want to love my kids so fiercely they can barely stand me sometimes, I'm going to do that. And if that's attachment, then attach me up. In Buddhism, attachment is literally viewed as a sickness. And that's when I was like, peace out. As for me and my house, we will serve happiness. We will serve comfort. We will serve good food. We will serve all of the things that bring us joy. If that's attachment, I'm all kinds of attached. The cult teaches people, Falun Gong teaches people that they must live like monks, free from attachment, free from material possession. But yet the cult leaders don't live that way. The higher-ups don't live that way. This is simply the age-old tactic of enslaving people by abusing their spiritual desires, their desire to become enlightened. It's the tale as old as time. It's been bullshit from the beginning and it will be bullshit till the end. Convincing a human being to give up everything they own, detaching themselves from their own children, that is pure evil. It is abusive and it is wrong. Come at me, Buddhists. To ask someone to give up everything they have and dedicate their lives to a God that you cannot prove exists is wrong. That's my opinion. And this is my channel where I give them. On April 25th, 1999, everything changed for the cult of Falun Gong. The Chinese Communist Party, led by Jiang Zemin, launched a campaign against Falun Gong. The CCP, the Communist Chinese Party, issued a letter expressing the organization's wish to see Falun Gong destroyed. So the government came out hardcore against Falun Gong. Since that time, Falun Gong has made claims that the Chinese government and the Communist Party has tortured, kidnapped, brainwashed, raped, and even killed members of Falun Gong. Has that happened? It's China. Probably. The CCP will even imprison members of Falun Gong, and then when they die in prison, they don't tell their families about it. Or they tell the families that the person took their own life, which is, that's a big thing in Chinese culture. The family members claim that when this happens to people they love, they never get the bodies back. The members of Falun Gong claim they are horribly persecuted by the Chinese government. Now, look. 2 things can be true. Falun Gong can be a dangerous cult, and the Chinese government can be persecuting these people and treating them terribly, hurting them, killing them. Both these things can be true. The Chinese government classified Falun Gong as Xiajia. In most contexts, that is the most similar word to the English word cult. And like I said earlier, the thing that really struck me was the amount of articles I found online defending Falun Gong. They have got a propaganda machine like no other. There is a lot of effort put into making the article look like it's been written by an American, by an Englishman, by a Swedish person. The cult really wants it to appear as though they have international support. The articles that are put out by the Epoch Times claim that the members of Falun Gong are just horribly persecuted by the Chinese government. We could do a whole episode on the Epoch Times. The rabbit hole is deep. The propaganda articles talk about how Falun Gong is a peaceful movement about love and compassion and God and enlightenment. And the members claim that they are being persecuted because China is atheist and they have the truth. They believe in God. And this is where it gets not so funny. I found this so incredibly offensive. Falun Gong compares the persecution of its members to the Holocaust. That right there was all I needed to hear. If you compare anything to that, you lose me forever. I know there have been other genocides, I do. But whenever you compare anything to the Holocaust, except other genocide, I'm like, you lost me. I'm gone. While I was reading and researching this episode, I got the feeling that the Chinese government feels very threatened by Falun Gong. There are supposedly tens of millions of members. And the Chinese government, like any insecure organization or person, is very threatened when anybody comes up against its power and leadership. Anything that gains traction or a large audience in China seems to be viewed as a threat. I don't have any doubt that the Chinese government has persecuted the members of Falun Gong. That doesn't change the fact that Falun Gong is a cult and it hurts its members. ABC did a very in-depth expose on this cult in 2020. Now, what you have to know is that the cult has settled here in America. They're in Deer Park, New York. About 2 hours outside of New York City, in the densely forested area around the Shen Yun Mountains, Falun Gong has settled at a commune they call the Mountain. There is a lake, there are beautiful buildings. One look at this compound and you can see this cult has money. Replica ancient Chinese temples have been constructed and there are sacred spaces where rituals are performed. Again, it all looks very beautiful and very peaceful from the outside. But I want to talk about a former member named Anna. Anna was brought up in the cult of Falun Gong. She suffered from anorexia as a child. That's very, very telling because we know that anorexia is a disease about control. And people that feel that their lives are out of control, what they eat and what they drink is something they can control. So anorexia becomes a disease for them because everything else is out of their control. They're forced to do this, they're forced to do that, but they can control what they eat or what they don't. It breaks my heart that somebody in such a high demand cult would be to the point mentally where, something like anorexia would take over their lives, but I can completely understand how that happens. So when Anna was 14, she was brought to the leader and he performed an exorcism on her. An exorcism for anorexia. Anna has spoken out against Falun Gong and appears to be doing much better now, but Anna might be in the minority. It is estimated that tens of millions of people worldwide belong to Falun Gong, and therefore many premature deaths are attributed to that large membership. It's also very ironic that a cult that is so focused on health and well-being and ancient Chinese medicine and qi and qigong, all of these things, also doesn't want you to go to the damn doctor. The members of Falun Gong wear these very recognizable yellow jackets. The official cult colors are red and yellow. I have seen Falun Gong practicing Qigong in the park at Washington Square in San Francisco. And then Jason and I also saw a group of practitioners in Seattle one day. They look like they're doing Tai Chi. They stand and they do those really cool, slow movements, but they're actually practicing Qigong. On the back of the jackets is usually written, Falun Dafa is great. The other times that we have run into Falun Gong members, Chinatown in Seattle, I remember running into them there, Chinatown in San Francisco, and Fremont Street in Las Vegas. They hand out pamphlets about the evil Chinese communist government. It's anti-communist propaganda. They hand out pamphlets, and then sometimes they also have these little bracelets, like those stretchy bracelets with beads on them, and they try to get you to buy them for like $5 or $10, and it's like a donation that goes to their cause. Anna, the former member, is quoted as saying, The group is not fading into obscurity. It has a lot more power than I thought, and that is very concerning to me, especially when I think about how many people are going to become indoctrinated and about how many children and families are going to be affected by this. Anna says that Li Hongzhi, who they call Master, by the way, once came to her house as a child. Why was the Master at the house? Anna's mother had worked her way up very high into the membership, and he would go to members' houses that had a lot of clout. On the day that Li Hongzhi came to Anna's house, he gave a big lecture about ridding yourself of all material possessions. Not only is that just so wrong to steal from people, Anna says that what it translates to in a home setting is disassociation and detachment from your own children. Anna said it is very common for parents to conflate this law of unattachment to being affectionless with your children. They do not display normal love and emotion to their kids. And that right there, throw everything else I've said out about this cult. Who cares? Anyone that is teaching you to be unaffectionate with your children or to detach emotionally from your children is pure evil, dead ass. Anna says that her parents were never present emotionally or mentally. They were always focused on the cult. And if there was a moment of affection, they would quickly withdraw because they felt they had done something wrong. They were getting attached. That is just messed up. On top of all of this, I try not to be shocked. Try not to die of shock. Li Hongzhi is racist. I know. These cults, they're never racist. They're never horrible. Li Hongzhi claims that when humans mix races, when they procreate with people of a different race, they are contributing to an alien plot against humanity. So as per usual, we have pulled back the shiny happy people exterior and now we're to the real ugliness. We've gone completely off the rails from lunacy straight into racism. Li Hongzhi, Master, also claims he can levitate, he can walk through walls, and he can read your mind. He's got X-ray vision. He can always tell what you're thinking. He can always see what you're doing, with the X-ray vision. And he says if you have thoughts about race mixing, he knows. Li Hongzhi says that race mixing is part of an alien plot to drive humanity further from the gods. He says that when a child is born from an interracial marriage, that child does not have a heavenly kingdom to go to. Because if there's a God, he cares about the amount of melanin in your skin. Racism is like the lowest form of human thought to me. It just shows how stupid you are. But on a serious note, can you imagine how horrifying this is as a child? You're taught that this man who's going to come to your house, this ain't no dead Bible prophet. This is someone that's going to come to your house. He can read your mind. He knows what you're thinking. And he can see you through the walls. That is absolutely horrifying. That is child abuse. Should I tell this story? Of course I'm going to tell the story. When I was a child, I was taught that God was always watching me. I don't blame my parents for this. My parents also grew up in the church. They were just passing on what they were taught. And it wasn't just my parents. It was my primary teachers. It was my neighbors. It was my church leaders. So I would guess the first time I remember doing this, I can picture my little outfit. I can see my little maroon bell bottoms. I would guess I was probably 3 or 4. When I was a little tiny girl, this is going to make me cry. I often feel really sorry for little tiny Stacy. She went through a lot. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. I know you know. That's why you're here. This is so fucked up. When I was a little tiny girl and I had to use the bathroom, I started sitting on the toilet and leaning the toilet seat into my back because I didn't want God in heaven and all the people in heaven to watch me use the bathroom. Do you know how messed up that is for me to hear those words come out of my mouth? It got so bad at one point when I was little, and like I say, I do have OCD and depression, and I am on the spectrum, so I understand that not everyone had these issues, but this is the way my mind works. It got so bad that I started using the bathroom in the dark. My mom would draw me a bath even as a little girl, and I would turn the lights off before I got in the bathtub. This is religious trauma. This is what religious trauma looks like, and you never know when it's going to show up, and it just did for me. And you all get to see it. Aren't you lucky? I just feel bad for my little self, The worst part about that story with the toilet seat, I did that until I was in my 30s. It's hard to talk about. It's embarrassing and it's painful. Whew. So with all of that in my mind and on my plate, listening to people like Anna talk about being a little child and having this omnipotent, all-powerful, terrifying man that everyone worshipped come to her house and believing that he could read her mind and see her through the walls, it's child abuse. It is. Anna goes on to talk about the fact that she realized at a very young age that she is gay. And I don't even have to tell you that this cult is homophobic, because of course they are. Where there is racism, where there is control, where there is fear-mongering, where there is guilt, there is also homophobia. We must fear anything that is different. We must fear anything that is true freedom. We must fear people who refuse to live within the confines we set for them. We must cast them aside and other them and push them out to the boundaries because they're dangerous. They're not part of the flock. They're going to bring the predators in on us all. It is caveman thinking. So poor little Anna is this little girl, and she's being mentally tortured with this concept that this man can look into her mind and find out that she's a lesbian. And what's going to happen to her? She's terrified. Am I going to get kicked out? Am I going to be homeless? Am I going to lose my family? It's child abuse. All right. Whew. Okay. Let's go on to the kookiest part of this, the dance company. Hold on to your hats and glasses, because this next part is, it's Shen Yun. Shen Yun, the dance troupe, is founded by the Falun Gong cult. The dance company is based at the Dragon Springs compound in Deer Park, New York, which is also where Li Hongzhi resides. The founders of Shen Yun state that the reason they wanted to start the dance company is to revive dying ancient Chinese arts. They want to keep the traditions alive that were traditions before the Chinese Revolution. Now, like I mentioned, there is another organization inside Falun Gong, and it is the Epoch Times. It is the propaganda machine. It is a print and media outlet, and it makes Fox News look like, strawberry shortcake. Epoch Times is hardcore anti-communist, anti-China, anti-atheist propaganda. Young people who grow up in the cult of Falun Gong are taken to audition for Shen Yun. Everyone who's a good little Falun Gonger, they want to be in Shen Yun. Now, we've talked about Anna. Anna was taken to an audition for Shen Yun early in her life, and she intentionally flopped. She did not want to be part of the dance company, and so she intentionally did very poorly at her audition, and she did not get a call back. And her mother was very, very angry because her mother knew she had intentionally thrown the audition. When you become a member of Shen Yun, it becomes your entire life. You are already in a cult, and then you are in a cult within a cult. There are multiple touring companies within the dance company. Each arm of the touring company has 40 men and 40 women. They perform mainly classical Chinese dances that I know very little about. The shows incorporate very precision choreography. It's almost, in Utah here, we have drill teams. They're called drill teams, and everything is very precision oriented. You want the entire team to move as a unit, and that's very much Shen Yun. It's all about precision choreography, tumbling, acrobatics, but it also incorporates ballet, and this is where I'm going to weigh in just briefly. This is going to sound critical and meaner than I want it to, but the ballet technique in the Shen Yun community is not good. Now, Chinese ballet dancers, they can be some of the best in the world, but when you dedicate your life to ballet, if you're going to be at the top of the ballet game, that's your whole life. You can't also be in a cult and also be in a touring company and also be, if you're going to be at the top of the ballet game, ballet is all you do. I know this is technical, but I sat and watched quite a bit of performances before I wrote this episode, and the foot placement is wrong, the hip placement is wrong, the feet are not developed. It is not technically a good dance company as far as the ballet portion is concerned. I can't speak on the rest of it. When I used to teach dance, I called it the jump splits effect. Crappy choreographers always incorporate what I call the jump splits effect. Do you know what the jump splits are? When somebody jumps up in the air and then they land in the splits on the floor. That isn't hard to do. If you're a dancer at all, you can do the jump splits. But when people do the jump splits, everybody goes, oh, jumping and landing in the splits. You know, it's very, very dramatic. It's not hard. Well, Shen Yun incorporates a lot of the jump splits effects in its shows. There's lots of grand jeté, which is like a person flying through the air in the splits. There's lots of high kicks. There's lots of leg lifts. These are good dancers. They're solid dancers. They've spent a lot of hours in training, but they are not dancers that would make it into the world of professional ballet. They might make it into the corps de ballet. These are not principal dancers. I'm not saying this isn't beautiful to look at. I'm not saying it isn't interesting. I'm just giving my technical opinion, and now we can move on. The costumes are magnificent. The set design is breathtaking. The colors are stunning. The artwork behind is beautiful. And every single person on that stage making this beautiful show is a cult member. The ticket prices for these shows start at $80 for the cheap seats. You can spend like $1,500 on a ticket to see Shen Yun. So when you take into account that the cheap tickets are $80, they have multiple touring companies, and these touring companies are going from town to town to town all year long. You can see where the millions of dollars is coming from. It's actually pretty genius. Nobody said cult leaders were completely stupid. They're all greedy. I read so many scathing reviews of Shen Yun. I've never been to a show myself. I almost went about 10 years ago. I can't remember why I didn't. I'm showing you some clips of Shen Yun that I recorded from my iPhone, because even if I download the clips and put them here on this platform, it'll flag it as a copyright. So that's why I'm just like filming it with my iPhone. I wanted to show you a little bit of it. One person on Reddit, the review was just scathing. They took a large group of people and they were so mad that they spent all this money. The review says, the music was boring. The dance routines were very short, not even 5 minutes, with long gaps of propaganda in between. We thought we were going to see a Chinese cultural performance, and instead it ended up being nothing but a giant propaganda event talking about how terrible China is and how bad the Communist Party is. I guess at one point in the performance, the scene behind them, the backdrop behind the dancers is digital. And I guess you see the city of Shanghai, and a giant tidal wave comes and destroys the city of Shanghai. So you think you're going to like this dance show, and instead you're like, it's like War of the Worlds. One review I read said, skip Shen Yun. It's artistically offensive and not worth your time. It pays lip service to 5,000 years of Chinese history, but is nothing but 2 hours of Las Vegas glitz and obnoxious political diatribe. The show is nothing but a vehicle for foisting the Falun Gong message on you in an oppressive and heavy-handed way. Many of the scenes show beatings by the Chinese police, and the reprehensible final performance piece shows China being destroyed by a tsunami while the dancers celebrate. That sounds about right, actually. After my experience covering cults, that sounds about right. They claim to be about love and compassion and unity and peace, and they are some of the nastiest, meanest, most miserable, heartless people on earth. The stuff that Teal Swan's followers have said to me about my looks, about my family, about my upbringing, the most vile personal attacks you cannot even imagine. But they're all about love and light. They're all about love and light. I feel sorry for the people in this cult. I do. I don't think their lives are their own. In fact, I know they aren't. Most of them are born into this, and if they try to leave, they lose absolutely everything. They lose their families, they lose their support, they lose their history. It's heartbreaking to me. Do I think this cult is at the top of the list as far as dangerous cults in the world right now? I don't. I mean, there are cults that are actually children and forced pregnancies and things like that. Now, I'm not saying that does not go on in Falun Gong. Please don't put those words in my mouth. But I haven't seen evidence of some of the evil that we've seen in other cults as far as sexual abuse of children and things like that. But any cult that peddles shame, fear, guilt, and separation of self is destructive. Any cult that shames its members out of seeking medical attention when they're sick is evil. And it don't matter how much money they spend on beautiful costumes and fancy set design, it's just putting lipstick on a pig. I did not think I was going to get emotional in that episode. I really didn't. That caught me off guard. Like I say, religious trauma is with you your whole life, and it pops up when you least expect it. But you know what's kind of cool? I've gotten to a place with you guys. A year and a half ago, I would have edited all that out. I wouldn't have told that story. and I would have edited that all out. And I don't do that anymore because you guys have made me feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable. And that's a real gift that you guys have given me. I mean that sincerely. I think it might be time to go back to the OBGYN and have my hormones checked, you guys. I'm very emotional lately, but it's true. I love you guys to death. You've been so supportive, and the more I'm myself here, the more most of you like it. You know, when I started, if I look back on the old episodes, when I very first started True Crime Tuesday, I'm like just like a stiff news person. I'm like terrified of the camera, and I couldn't be farther from that anymore. You guys have really helped me to open up, and I just love you for it. Hit the like button if you like the video and for some reason want to see more of this hot mess. Subscribe to the channel if you want to support me, and you can also join my Patreon. Some of you give $5, $10 a month. It helps me keep the videos coming because Lord knows I ain't making no money doing this. You can also be part of our fundraiser. You do not have to be on Patreon in order to donate to the fundraiser. This is the thumbnail on my channel that will take you to the video that explains all about the fundraiser. You can also listen to my podcasts. Again, this is Dining with Death. This is just the audio taken from the video episodes, but this is my baby. This is my new podcast, Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I release a new episode every Monday and every Wednesday. Everything's been re-recorded, and a lot of them are stories from the YouTube channel, but there are also some podcast exclusives. I'm gonna go have a nap. I hope you're doing something fun today. I think about you, and I hope you're doing well. Stay safe, my friends. Be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.